Hi everybody, on 8th of February 2024, the Government of India launched something called the White Paper of the Indian Economy.
On Thursday, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman tabled a white paper.
A white paper on the economy during the previous Congress-led UPA government.
This is a white paper on the Indian economy and its impact on the lives of the people of India.
And this document is a direct attack by the current government on the UPA because it puts out a 60-page super analysis on how terribly the UPA was handling the Indian economy and how the BJP has been the savior of the Indian economy. How the Indian economy was bleeding in 2014 and how it is shining bright with prosperity in 2023. How the Congress paralyzed the country with scams and loan waivers and how the BJP has cleaned the system to make it better.
2014 में जो चीजें जब मेरे सामने आई मैं चौंक गया था। अर्थव्यवस्था हर प्रकार से बहुत गंभीर स्थिति में थी।
देश को ऐसे गंभीर अवस्था में खड़े रख के चले गए।
I don't know what they're talking about. We had better economic growth, we had pulled more people out of poverty, and all the numbers are reliable, internationally verified numbers.
स्कैंडल के ऊपर स्कैंडल चलते रहे। कॉमनवेल्थ गेम्स का इतना फ्लॉप शो हुआ, भारत का बदनाम हुआ पूरे दुनिया में।
As much as I want to stay unbiased, these stats tell you a pretty solid story and they make a pretty compelling argument. So in this episode today, without giving you any of my opinions, I'm going to help you decode this super intense document in simple words so that as citizens of India, you can understand on what grounds does the white paper of the Indian economy blame the UPA government for mishandling the Indian economy, what were the biggest problems which were bleeding the Indian economy till 2014, and most importantly, according to the white paper, what has the BJP done so revolutionary that they're confidently blaming the Congress. And the disclaimer is that none of what I'm presenting is my opinion. I am only presenting the facts stated in the white paper. So listen to everything that I'm saying and you decide by yourself who is right and who is wrong. If this is clear, let's get started. Before we move on, I want to thank my favorite sponsor of all, and that is Wintwealth. And they are my favorite sponsor because Parsh and I have personally invested in Wintwealth. You see, whenever we look to park our emergency fund, most people invest in FDs, and 90% of the FDs in India give us less than 8% interest. And we settle with this less interest because of the safety that it provides with fixed interest, right? But what if I tell you that you could get up to 9.5% interest on your FDs, and that too with the highest level of safety? Well, this is where, ladies and gentlemen, Wintwealth comes in. Wint is a Zerodha-backed startup which provides a chance to invest in high-interest Unity Small Finance Bank FDs. And while 90% of the FDs in India give you less than 8% interest, FDs on Wintwealth give you up to 9.5% interest. And the best part is, your investment will be insured by the Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation, which is the subsidiary of RBI. And you will have an insurance coverage of up to 5 lakh rupees. So you can enjoy the dual benefit of safety and high interest with the FDs on Wintwealth for your emergency funds. So if you want to park your money in a safe but high interest instrument, then use the link in the description, invest in FDs on Wintwealth and let your money grow safely and quickly. And now on with the episode. Chalo, let's start from the basics. Out of this 60-page document, we have picked the 7 most important points which could give you an idea about how and what went wrong during the UPA regime. So the question is, what are these 7 points? Well, the first point that the white paper points out is the failure of the Congress to curb inflation. So if you look at this chart, the average inflation from 2004 to 2014 was 8.2%, and it even reached double digits in FY10, FY11 and FY13. Now this is a very big deal because if Raju is a worker who made 12,000 rupees a month in 2004 and spent 10,000 rupees to buy necessities and eventually saved 2,000 rupees a month, merely due to inflation, the cost to buy the same necessities would shoot up to 22,761 rupees per month. So even if his income increased from 12,000 to 24,000 rupees, he still won't be able to save 2,000 rupees. And this 1,300 rupees that he saves will have very less value as compared to the 2,000 rupees that he saved in 2004. So even with a 100% increase in wages, the purchase power of the worker degraded merely due to inflation. So according to the white paper, inflation was very high, which eroded the savings of the Indian middle class, and the UPA government failed to curb the inflation.
महंगाई देश की वो कड़वी हकीकत है जिसे हर आम और खास परेशान है।
जब से कांग्रेस लेड यूपीए गवर्नमेंट आई है
40,000 करोड़ रुपए का अनाज बर्बाद हो रहा है प्रति साल।
रेट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन तेजी के साथ बढ़ने का सिलसिला जारी है।
आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, आप महंगाई कम कर पाओ या न कर पाओ, कम से कम अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जहां छोड़ के गए थे वहां तो ला करके रख दो।
The second point that the government points out is the mismanagement of banks. To explain this, the white paper uses a term called the gross non-performing asset ratio or GNPA. In very simple words, if a bank gives out a loan of 1 crore rupees to 10 different people, the total money lent to these people is 10 crore rupees, right? And now, if 3 of these people who have taken a loan of 3 crore rupees stop paying their installments, then the gross non-performing asset ratio would be 3 crores divided by 10 crores into 100, which is 30%. So it's basically the percentage of loans out of which the banks do not expect to make money off. So if the GNPA is high, it means that the banks have given out thousands of crores in loans which cannot be recovered back. In short, the GNPA states the reckless lending of the banks and the government has to keep control of the banks. Now, according to the white paper, when Vajpayee took power, the GNPA was 16%, and when he left, he reduced it to just 7.8%, which is absolutely incredible. So when UPA came to power, the banks were in good financial health. But as of September 2013, this GNPA shot up to 12.3%, and this means thousands of crores worth of additional bad loans were given during the UPA regime, which was bleeding our banks and our economy. But you know what? The white paper does not stop here. It further goes on to say that 44% of the bad loans were not even included in this number. And had these numbers been included, that alone would have added another 6.7% to the GNPA ratio. So the GNPA percentage in reality has shot up from 7.8% at the end of the Vajpayee regime to 19% during the UPI regime. So 19% of the lakhs of crores of loans could not be recovered back because the UPA couldn't control the banks well, because the UPA did not bring in regulations to control the lending. Now, how this was hidden is something that you can find in the paper attached below. If this is clear, let's move on to the third point. The third point that the white paper points out is the mismanagement of forex reserves by the UPA government. So the white paper says that in March 2004, India had 17 months of forex reserves left. But in September 2013, India had just 6 months of forex left. This is where the Congress government came up with something called the FCNRB accounts in September 2013 to increase the forex of India. For those who don't know, FCNRB stands for Foreign Currency Non-Resident Bank Accounts. These are deposit accounts that can be opened by non-resident Indians or NRIs and persons of Indian origin or PIO. And here, money can be deposited in foreign currencies. For example, let's say an NRI named Arjun lives in the United States and wants to save some money in an Indian bank. But when he saves this money in the Indian bank, he would want to avoid the risk of currency exchange fluctuation, right? Because the rupee has depreciated against the dollar by a large extent. So Arjun would be scared that the rupee would depreciate further against the dollar. As a result, his deposit value will get eroded. At the same time, India needs a lot of dollars from people like Arjun so that we can have enough forex for our exports. So when Arjun decides to open an FCNRB account with the bank in India and deposits $10,000 in it, the bank offers him a fixed interest rate of 3% annually on $10,000. So the principal and interest will be paid back to him in USD at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, Arjun will earn $300 as interest and he will have $10,300 by the end of the year. And since the interest is paid in dollars, regardless of whether the Indian rupee has strengthened or weakened against the US dollar during this period, Arjun's deposit will not get affected. At the same time, if 10,000 people like Arjun deposit $10,000 each, it gives the RBI an additional $100 million in forex. And then after a certain time of let's say 3 years, the RBI will return the principal of $10,000 along with the interest for that particular year. This is how the concept of FCNRB mutually benefits both the NRIs and the RBI. So by offering higher interest, the RBI attracted forex from all across the world. This and many more moves enable the RBI to raise $26.6 billion, which was 12 times the 1991 IMF bailout. So this seems like a genius move, right? Well, guess what? Because of these high interest rates that were offered in 2013, it wasn't the Congress government that paid the interest, but the BJP government that had to pay the interest and principal, which was to be paid to these people in 2016. So the white paper says that the Congress government created a problem for the BJP government that they had to solve by bleeding the forex of India. This is the third point that the white paper points out, which is the mismanagement of forex. Then we come to the fourth point. This paper also attacks UPA's handling of the economy, particularly after the global financial crisis of 2008.
It was one of the most profound events in generations with huge consequences for the American economy and households throughout the country.
Lehman Brothers is going bankrupt. Shares in Lehman Brothers have plummeted more than 80% in 2008 alone.
We saw that in September of 2008 like we've never seen it before in financial markets.
Those people who had purchased beyond their capacity are suffering.
This is where the UPA government came up with something called the fiscal stimulus. In simple words, fiscal stimulus is the action taken by the government to catalyze economic activity in a country. So this is done using tax cuts, infrastructure projects, and lowering interest rates. So in the years following up the crisis, India's economy slowed down a lot to grow by just 3.9% in 2008. But we quickly bounced back in 2009 when we grew by 8.5%. And this recovery was quite fast as compared to other countries. In fact, IMF charts show that India wasn't as badly hit by the crisis as many other countries. And because of this quick recovery, some critics argue that the government's decision to keep spending more money for a long time after the crisis wasn't actually necessary. And since we borrowed a lot of money to spend it in our fiscal stimulus, for 6 years, from 2009 to 2014, India's gross fiscal deficit increased by a large extent. Now, what is fiscal deficit? In simple words, if the government makes 100 rupees in its tax and non-tax revenue and spends 120 rupees, the 20 rupees in extra spending is the fiscal deficit. So, for 6 consecutive years between FY9 to FY14, the ratio of India's gross fiscal deficit was at least 4.5% of the GDP. And then it increased to 4.5 to 5% of the GDP in 3 out of the 6 years. And then it further increased to 5 to 6% in 1 year and more than 6% in 2 years. And by the way, this is not just during the 2008 recession. The fiscal deficit also touched 6% even in 2011. But if you look at BJP's performance, until the pandemic, we were at 3.44%. But due to COVID, it shot up to 9.18% and then it has come down to 6.4%. This is the mismanagement of finance that the white paper points out in the Congress governance. And here's where some economists argue that government debt is not always bad. Even Nitin Gadkari took a lot of debt. But what did he do with that debt? He built highways which eventually contributed to the economy of the country. So if debt is used to make investments which will eventually pay dividends to the economy, it's not at all bad, right? Well, that's absolutely right. So let's get deeper into the UPA spending and figure out whether they actually spend this money into infrastructure or not. This is where we need to look at something called capital expenditure of the UPA. For those who don't know, there are 2 types of government expenditures. The first is revenue expenditure and then we have capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure is the expense that the government incurs to keep itself functioning on a day-to-day basis. This includes the salary of government employees, grants and subsidies and many more expenditures which may not contribute in future to the economy of the country. But it will help you handle and keep the government functioning at present. But capital expenditure is the amount of money that the government spends on investments like highways and high-speed cables. So because of these investments, the government can actually make money in the future. So the best way to find out whether a government is investing in your country's growth or not would be to look at their capital expenditure and see how much is it as a percentage of the total expenditure of the government. So if you look at this graph, the capital expenditure when Vajpayee left was 31%. Whereas in 2014, it was just 16%. And today, it is again back to 28%. So this drop suggests that a smaller portion of the government's budget was spent on capital expenditure. In fact, the white paper also states that while 16,000 kilometers of highways were laid during the 10 years of the UPA power, during the NDA's time from 1997 to 2002, 24,000 kilometers of highways were added. So what NDA could do in 5 years from 1997 to 2002 is something that the UPA did not do from 2004 to 2014 when they had 10 long years. So this comparison in a way indicates that even though the UPA government borrowed money, perhaps it did not use it for important investments like highways. So the question is, if the borrowed money wasn't spent on big projects like infrastructure, where did the money go? Well, the answer to it lies in the second type of expenditure that I mentioned, which is revenue expenditure. Which means what? The money that the government spends on day-to-day expenses and consumption rather than investment in growth. So the reports from the Reserve Bank of India highlighted that the UPA government spent too much on these kind of expenses. One big example of the same is the spending on agricultural debt waiver and debt relief scheme of 2008.
In February 2008, UPA 1 announced its biggest SOP for farmers.
The real game changer unveiled by the UPA was a 52,000 crore rupee farm loan relief scheme.
There are about 3 crore small and marginal farmers and about 1 crore other farmers will benefit from the scheme.
A 52,280 crore rupees farm loan waiver for 3.5 crore small and marginal farmers.
For marginal farmers and small farmers, there will be a complete waiver of all loans of over 200.
So when the government waived off the loans, it costed the government 52,000 crores, which was 0.9% of India's entire GDP. This scheme was meant to help farmers by forgiving their debts. However, a study by the World Bank found that this scheme did not lead to expected benefits at all. And in spite of the loan waivers, neither did the farmers make more investments nor did their income actually increase. In fact, after the government paid the banks started lending less to those areas where people hadn't paid their installments. And the worst part was that farmers after a certain point became so carefree that even if they could pay back the loans, they started defaulting because they knew that the government would waive their loan off. People, before we move ahead, while editing the video, we found something very, very interesting. While the white paper blames the Congress for loan waivers, it is also important for you to note that even the BJP government gave out a lot of loan waivers. Take a look.
After protests by farmers in the state, Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis has promised a 30,000 crore rupee waiver on small and medium loans by October.
Government has fulfilled its poll promise and waived off farm loans worth over 36,000 crore rupees.
Now the total outstanding debt of small and marginal farmers in Maharashtra is over 1 lakh crore rupees.
So the moral of the story is that while BJP's argument of Congress not spending enough in capital expenditure is valid, it is also important for us to understand that both these parties have engaged in loan waivers to please their own vote banks. If this is clear to you, let's move ahead. Furthermore, the white paper goes on to say that the UPA government did not spend all the money that it had on social sector schemes. While the NDA government had 37 crores of unspent social scheme budget, the UPA government had 94,060 crores of unspent social scheme budget. So the white paper says that UPA has been irresponsible in allocation of funds towards the social schemes. And lastly, the white paper attacks UPA for the countless scams that have happened in India.
UPA government ने
इतने सारे घोटाले
भारत देश का भयंकर नुकसान किया।
टोटल लगाया तो 12 लाख करोड़ के बाद मैंने टोटल छोड़ दिया।
2014 के पहले खबरें क्या आती थी?
सत्यम घोटाला किसने किया? यूपीए। कॉमनवेल्थ घोटाला किसने किया? यूपीए। कोयला घोटाला किसने किया? यूपीए ने।
स्कैंडल के ऊपर स्कैंडल चलते रहे, देश को ऐसे गंभीर अवस्था में खड़े रख के चले गए।
इनसे सुधरने की मुझे कोई अपेक्षा नहीं है, वो जनता इनको सुधार देगी।
Now we already know what these scams were because they've been repeated in media countless times, so let's not get into the details of them. But this brings us to another important question. Now that we know all that the white paper states about the governance of the UPA, the question is, what has the BJP government done so special that they are so openly and confidently criticizing the UPA? Well, not so surprisingly, the white paper has documented the entire analysis very well. And to be very honest, I am just fascinated by how well a government body could explain its ideas using concepts and graphs. So let's get into it. Long story short, during the UPA regime, inflation was very high, the banks were in a bad state, we were in deep debt, forex was very low, capital expenditure was very less, resulting in less infrastructure development, and social schemes were not implemented properly. So the question is, how has the BJP government turned the table? Well, let's start with the first question, which is, how has the BJP government fixed inflation? To deal with inflation, the new government focused on addressing the root cause of high inflation rates. Firstly, in 2016, an important decision was made whereby the Reserve Bank of India was given a special task of keeping inflation within a target of 2 to 6%. And based on this fundamental target, everything from interest rates to regulations were brought in, because of which from 2014 to 2023, the average annual inflation rate was brought down to 5% as compared to the previous average of 8.2% from 2004 to 2014. And mind you, this tenure between 2014 to 2023 includes both COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war. So the current government brought in a very strict target, a clear system, and an action plan based on the target to keep inflation under control. Secondly, the white paper highlights a drastic increase in foreign direct investment, which has boosted India's foreign reserves. So from 2005 to 2014, India mobilized a gross FDI of $305.3 billion. But from 2015 to 2024, FDI nearly doubled to $596.5 billion. And because of this, we went from just $303 billion in reserves in March 2014, which was enough to cover 7.8 months of imports, to $617 billion by January 2024, which is now enough to cover 10.6 months of imports. Thirdly, if you look at where the capital expenditure of the UPA and BJP went, there is again a stark difference. While the portion of the budget dedicated to capital expenses was 16% in 2014, it shot up to 28% in 2024. In fact, while in 2014, the capex was 1.9 lakh crores, by 2023-24, it shot up by 5 times to 9.5 lakh crores. So even if you adjust this amount to inflation, it's a huge difference. And as a percentage of GDP, from 2010 to 2014, while the capital expenditure accounted for an average of 12% of the total government spending, from 2015 to 2024, this average increased to 14.5%. And the white paper says that while the UPA was wasting money in loan waivers, the BJP reduced the compound annual growth rate of the revenue expenditure from 14.2% to 9.9%. And the result of this high capex investment is that the construction of national highways was progressing at a slow pace of just 12 kilometers per day in 2014. But by 2023, this rate has more than doubled to 28 kilometers per day. And in the BJP report card, we already saw how they doubled the port capacity and electrified our railways.
एक्सप्रेस हाईवे, ग्रीन एक्सप्रेस हाईवे, एक्सिस कंट्रोल एक्सप्रेस हाईवे बन रहे हैं।
हिंदुस्तान का रोड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अमेरिका के बराबर होगा।
आप कश्मीर से लेकर कन्याकुमारी तक हम रोड बना रहे हैं। आप दिल्ली मुंबई हाईवे पे जाइए, अभी रतलाम तक अभी जल्दी इनॉग्रेशन के लिए तैयार है।
60 किलोमीटर के अंदर एक ही टोल नाका होगा, दूसरा होगा तो वो बंद किया जाएगा।
And if you want to know more about the infrastructure growth under the BJP, please check out the video from the I button. And this brings us to the last and perhaps one of the most important systemic changes that was brought in the regime of the BJP, which was the Indian Bankruptcy Code.
The Union Cabinet today has amended the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code via the ordinance route.
The Supreme Court has upheld the Insolvency Code in entirety.
The government is looking to amend the IBC, the Bankruptcy Act.
It came at a time when the Indian banking sector was struggling with an NPA crisis.
The government dues could be low in the waterfall because whatever you give to the government, you take from the banks.
And this Indian Bankruptcy Code was so revolutionary that every year, this idea alone has saved our banks tens of thousands of crores in losses. And as much as I would love to explain the Indian Bankruptcy Code along with case studies, we are running short of time and it's already information overload. So if you comment below, I will make a separate detailed case study on the Indian Bankruptcy Code and how it has helped the Indian economy. But long story short, because of IBC and several other regulation strategies deployed by the RBI, today, the gross non-performing assets have dropped from 12.3% in 2014 to just 3.2% in 2023. These are the most important points that I found with the white paper of the Indian economy states. Now, along with all this information, I'm also attaching the white paper in the description. Do have a look at this one table which actually gives you a difference between the social schemes implemented during the UPA regime and the BJP time, and you will get a very clear idea about the entire argument that the white paper makes. So read through all the information and eventually you can go on to form your informed opinion on the performance of the current and the previous government. Also, in response to this paper, the Congress has presented the black paper to state all the terrible things that this government has done. So again, if you want a video on IBC or the black paper, please comment below and we'll start working on them accordingly. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. And if you want to grow your money quickly and safely, check out the FDs listed at Vint Wealth from the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.